On behalf of the museum, it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's program. You Are Here, Mapping Reston's Past and Present by Chris Rooney. Chris is a former resident of Reston, a South Lakes High School grad, a local history aficionado, a custom map illustrator, and Facebook administrator and Instagram curator of the very popular group Reston Remember When. I checked today, I think we have almost 8,000 members. So if you're not on it, check it out. It's fascinating. And Chris posts a lot of really interesting pictures and memorabilia on there. Tonight, Chris will lead us in a visual adventure spanning Captain John Smith's first charting of Chesapeake's tributaries in the Virginia colony to the soon-to-be updated metro map for the Silver Line expansion to Dulles. Without further ado, I'll give you Chris Rooney.
Okay. So, a show of hands, how many of you used a map to get here tonight? Anybody? All right. All right. Congratulations. You are here. And when I say are, I mean Reston. So come along for the ride. I grew up in Reston in the southernmost tip on Soapstone Drive. I lived there from 1971 when the neighborhood was still brand new until I went off to college and then eventually moved to California and currently reside in Berkeley. I spent more than half my life living outside of Reston, but I still call it my hometown. Growing up next door, we had a neighbor who was the head librarian at the United States Geological Survey, headquartered here in Reston. The USGS had an open house sometime in the late 1970s, and our neighbor invited us to come. At the open house, they had this big topographical map. Visitors were asked if they could identify their home, and with a little help from my dad, I was able to pinpoint it. Those able to find their home were given these buttons, which I still have today. Maybe this is where my interest in maps began. 4 years ago this month, I gave a talk here on the early advertising of Reston in the 1960s. The following year, in 2019, I was back in Reston for my 30th high school reunion at South Lakes. By then, I knew I wanted to give another talk, this time on the subject of maps. But I didn't know what to title it. I was visiting the Reston Museum and saw that yellow triangle that read, "You Are Here." Great, that's it, I said. I submitted my proposal for the talk, and then, of course, the pandemic happened. The talk was postponed in 2020, then again in 2021. Meanwhile, I saw that an exhibit coming to the Oakland Museum of California, Oakland being next to Berkeley, and it was titled, "What Else? You Are Here." All about the mapping of Oakland. I mean, what are the chances, really? What they used to introduce their exhibit. So I'll give you a chance to read this. And it kind of really sums up what maps are about. It's a great little summary. Let's look at the different types of maps there are. Of course, some fit more than one description. Anywhere from political maps, physical maps, economic or resource maps, road maps, system maps. Let's start by going way back. I begin with this 1889 North American map. It illustrates the extermination of the American bison, which we also call the buffalo. The red lines show the extent prior to Europeans in the New World. Once upon a time, their range stretched from northern Canada up over the Rockies, as far south into Mexico, and eastward well into portions of present-day Virginia. The dates in red indicate when the bison were last seen in that region. Now you Restonians can truly say, "Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roamed." Prior to the English settling in Virginia, the original human inhabitants of the area were various Native American tribes that were unfortunately forced westward, like the bison. As a small kid, I found a quartz arrowhead while digging in my next door neighbor's yard, quite similar to these found elsewhere in Virginia. Solid proof that Native Americans were here in Reston. Land ho. The English established the colony of Jamestown in 1607. Captain John Smith, sailor and leader of the colony, went on a mission to navigate the bay, the rivers, and the coastlines of Virginia. This map, later made in England, is most likely based on its findings. If we rotate the map 90 degrees so that north is pointing upward, we can see that it's pretty accurate. Following the Potomac River upstream, we can venture to guess that Reston would be here. This is a survey of the northern neck of Virginia, owned by Lord Fairfax, the only nobility to live in America. Following the 1722 Treaty of Albany, in which the Iroquois were forced to abandon all lands east of the Blue Ridge Mountains to the colony of Virginia, colonists and enslaved persons of wide variety of ethnic and religious backgrounds began settling the lands that would become Fairfax County. This is a 1751 map of Virginia and the Maryland colonies. If we look closer, we start to see established roads going westward in Fairfax County. So we come upon George Washington, born in the Northern Neck, 1732. 1932 saw the 200th anniversary of his birth. After the restoration of Washington's Mount Vernon, Virginia's colonial era capital, Williamsburg, and other colonial American sites in the late 1920s to early 1940s, there was this revitalization of interest in the period. This included colonial revival design home signs, historical road markers erected, and signs in front of early American buildings and homes that suggested that George Washington once slept there. There was even a play and a later movie starring Jack Benny about a couple who buy an old home believed to have hosted Washington. Did George Washington ever sleep here in what is now Reston? Well, a young Washington took his first significant trip in 1748, when at the age of 16, he was invited to accompany a surveying party to assess land in the western part of Virginia belonging to Thomas Lord Fairfax. For more than a decade, as a surveyor and soldier, Washington moved throughout the present-day states of Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Of the 199 professional surveys attributed to Washington, he did the majority of his surveying in Virginia's Frederick, New Hampshire counties, the westernmost counties of the Northern Neck. The closest evidence of him ever coming near present-day Reston was on his way to the frontier in 1753, prior to the French and Indian War. He apparently stopped for the night at Culver Mill, what is now on Route 7, just a stone's throw from here. A revolution happens, a new nation is formed, the capital of the United States moves back and forth between New York and Philadelphia for its first fledgling years. If there was no Washington, D.C., there would most definitely be no Reston. In 1790, Congress passed the Residence Act, which approved the creation of the national capital on the Potomac River. The exact location was to be selected by now President George Washington. Born from land donated by the states of Maryland and Virginia, the initial shape of the federal district was a rotated square measuring 10 miles on each side, totaling 100 square miles. Northern Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. in 1839. During this time, the Fairfax family sold parcels of land, including over 8,000 acres to Benjamin Thornton. During Thornton's ownership, a railroad from Alexandria to the Coleridge area of Western Virginia, now West Virginia, is built right through his land. But first, we come to a detour in our trip. Go west, young man. As I mentioned, I live in Berkeley, California, which is just across the bay from San Francisco. To the north is Marin County in the little town of Fairfax. I've always wondered if it had any connection to Fairfax County, Virginia. As a matter of fact, it does. Lord Charles Snowden Fairfax, who lived from 1829 to 1869, was a younger brother just like Prince Harry, who gave up his low status in his Virginia family border and goes west, seeks his fortune in the California gold rush of 1849, strikes out, settles in Marin, gets into local politics as the state of California establishes itself. Fairfax dies at age 40 in this mark. Shortly before it was incorporated in 1931, the town of Fairfax, where he once resided, is named for him. Today, the town of Fairfax has a population of around 8,000 and is most well known as the birthplace of Mount Viking, in the crossroads of a divided nation. Continuing on our trip, this 1862 map now shows the Loudon, New Hampshire Railroad stopping at Thornton Station. We see familiar landmarks such as Lawyers Road, Money Corner, Snake Den Run, and Colton Run on the map. So this is what would be Reston. The Civil War breaks out in 1861 between the North and the South. Nearby are such notable battlefields as Bull Run and Antietam. There is a skirmish at Drainsville, north of present-day Reston, on December 20th, 1861. Though the 2-hour firefight was small, of no strategic importance, and only light casualties, it marked the first time in the East that the Union Army had bested their Confederate enemy and was able to drive them from the field. Wheelie, the old new town. In the 1890s, Dr. Carl Adolph Max Wheelie envisioned a planned community close enough to Washington to attract government workers. He hired a planner to lay out streets, built a town hall, a post office, lakes, and a hotel that housed a health resort. The industrial area included a soapstone and talcum factory, a brick kiln, and a sawmill. Wheelie's dream died after only a half dozen lots were sold. Disillusioned and bankrupt, the town's founder died of pneumonia 3 years after the town's incorporation. So here's the town of Wheelie overlaid on Reston to give you some idea of its size and location. This area right here. Wheelie and Reston actually coexisted for a number of years as the Wheelie Town Charter was finally revoked by the state of Virginia in 1990. This 1907 map of Fairfax County hangs at the Fairfax Library's history room. It shows Herndon, Wheelie, Hunters, and Vienna along the now Southern Railroad, now entering Sunset Hills. This 1927 Fairfax County map also hangs at the Fairfax Library. That same year, Abram Smith Bowman bought the land, which would become Sunset Hills. Notice the map lists both Wheelie and Sunset Hills. The railroad is now the Washington and Old Dominion. 3 roads that still exist are Ridge Road, which is now Reston Parkway, Baron Cameron Road, and Lawyers Road. Besides going into the bourbon distillery business after Prohibition, the Bowmans were equestrians who hosted fox hunts and steeplechase races on their heavily wooded property. The Bowmans would buy more land after World War II that had once been owned by Benjamin Ford. The USGS, which was originally headquartered in DC, produces topographical maps of all parts of the United States like this one. Looking at this particular one, I bet they have no idea back then that there would be a new town made from this countryside and that the USGS would relocate there exactly 30 years later. Looking closely, it still shows the town of Wheelie, 1944. The southern stretch of present-day Reston Parkway is labeled the 50 Road and is unpaved. Same with Lawyers Road. Only Baron Cameron from Leesburg Pike to Herndon is paved. So it did coexist with Reston. Here we go. Another detour. This time it's a road trip. So any guesses as to what Jim Wells County, Texas, in New York City have to do with Reston? Any guesses? No? Here's a hint.
Pipeline.
Yes. Commissioned in 1950, the Transco pipeline installed between Texas and New York goes right through Reston. Approximately 10,000 square miles of pipeline in the network. An aerial view of Reston's diagonal scar, you may not notice it from the ground so easily with manicured golf courses and parking lots disguising many parts of it. But that's what it looks like. So nothing's built on it, no. But there are parking lots, there are gardens, golf courses, but no trees, no buildings. As a result of the Great Depression, World War II, Washington, D.C. grows. More federal employees, more offices, more homes, more suburbs, construction of the Pentagon during the war, and later the CIA in Virginia. The Washington area needs a new airport besides national to handle the jet gauges, longer runways, and international travel to and from the nation's capital. Burke is a prime contender, but so is Chantilly farmland on the Fairfax-Loudoun County border. It seems ripe for the taking, despite being so remote. Chantilly Airport is chosen. The 1958 Washington Post article and map shows the possible exclusive routes explored from the district to the airport. In the end, Route C is the winner. By 1960, the airport was named after John Foster Douglas. As you can see in this Washington Post photo, it demonstrates the enormity to be 9,800-acre airport compared to National's minuscule one. Dulles would be dedicated in November 1962 by President Kennedy. So this is all the land for Dulles Airport. Just this little bit here is National. Welcome to the place called Reston. This is an overhead aerial image of the Bowman Distillery in 1960. The Bowman family decided to sell the land around their distillery. We now see the Dulles Access Road under construction, the W&OD Railroad parallel to it, and the diagonal cut of the completed Transco pipeline. Robert E. Simon buys the property in 1961 with the ambition of building a new community. Not only is it sandwiched between a brand new airport and the nation's capital, but there is the promise of an outer circumferential highway. Yes, an even bigger beltway around DC. Sleepy Fairfax County is waking up to the reality that it will get bigger and will need to control growth. Reston, in the planning stages, petitions the county for special zoning ordinances that plan for green open spaces and the novel idea of cluster housing. So to give you some idea what was part of the master plan, covers over 6,000 acres on former Sunset Hills. The project was expected to take 15 years to develop. Its population 75,000 by 1980. The Reston master plan provides for 35 churches, 112-acre shopping center, 15 elementary schools, 6 high and intermediate school sites, postgraduate school. This color-coded master plan shows high, medium, and low-density residential, town center, village centers, industry, open space, and lakes. With a projected population of 75,000 residents by 1980, the Reston master plan anticipated 15 elementary schools. The Reston industrial master plan zoned land along the Dulles corridor for light industry. Early businesses at Isaac Newton Square and along Sunset Hills Road and Reston Avenue included HRB Singer, Air Survey, Hazelton Labs, Scope, and Motorola. Here's a map study for Reston's complex and expensive sewer infrastructure. The western part of the county was largely undeveloped. This was the same hurdle in the 1950s when the Bowmans offered land to the University of Virginia to build a Northern Virginia satellite campus. Eventually, it was decided that the infrastructure was better in the city of Fairfax to build that campus. Later, that became George Mason University. On the left, we see Bob Simon looking over plans of Reston as construction begins. On the right, L. Peter Clough, director of the residential division, discussed Lake Ann Village Center at the top. A color-coded map of Lake Ann. Notice how North Shore Drive originally hugged the north side of Lake Ann and connected at Wheelie, where Inland Cluster is today. Wheelie then only goes to Fairway Drive. South Shore Drive has 2 planned entry points on Fairway Drive. The green at the top anticipated a middle school and possible second elementary school. In order to hype the new town of Reston, the press are invited and a self-guided tour map for them is created. Notice the Roundhouse Information Center on the hill that is now Cameron Crescent. The biggest curiosity here, though, is that Wheelie Avenue is referred to as Thornton Avenue. And this is the only place that I've ever seen this mentioned. This is an early promotional brochure with a map that seems more like it's an advertising for a summer camp. With its triangular icons for housing, walkways, playgrounds, shopping, schools, and other amenities. This article talked about the groundbreaking of Reston's and the world's first community air conditioning system at Lake Ann. To go with that, an aerial bird's eye view illustration map of Lake Ann Village was created to show the distribution of the unique air conditioning system throughout the village. By 1965, Reston is populated with both residents and industries shown in brown. Development has begun on the Hunters Woods Village. The map still shows the old diagonal road from the Bowman Distillery to Barrington Avenue, which would soon be a thing of the past. This is the top and bottom halves of a promotional pictorial map that shows the mostly developed Lake Ann Village and the residential beginnings of the Hunters Woods Village with its nod to its equestrian pursuits. A 1967 Washington Star article recommends for the horse lovers to seek out the Reston South Riding Center stables that once resided along Reston Avenue in the Hunters Woods Village. And now a word from tonight's sponsor. In 1967, investors Gulf Oil forced out Bob Simon to take over management of Reston. This 1968 DC area map, most likely from a Gulf service station, cross-promotes Reston on the backside. So Gulf could have thrown out the whole master plan, but decided to keep at it and heavily promote home sales, as you can tell by this land parcel map. To encourage home buyers, a self-guided walking tour map of Lake Ann Village from the Reston Sales Office is offered. New home sales and promotion were important in the late 1960s to really make Reston succeed. This tall promo piece is a very stylized, simplified map of the two halves of Reston. You see the first appearances of Blade Drive and Soapstone Drive and the single-family homes going up there. The circled A, T, and S indicate furnished models of apartments, townhouses, and single-family homes for show. This similar piece takes promotional purposes one step further with photos, a map of how to get to Reston, and descriptions of the available open models, and a more accurate map of Reston based on the master plan. The Reston phone directory included a street map of Reston each year as it was constantly growing and changing. Even though North Shore fully extended to Ring Road, it is still shown as Forest Edge Drive here, based on that earlier map that I showed you of Lake Ann as it hugged the waterfront. This later changed to what it is now. Portions of South Reston are still a work in progress. Glade Drive did not connect yet through undeveloped Deepwood. Notice the unnamed road linking Glade and soon to be South Lakes Drive. On the other side, we see Lake Elsa, which was named after Bob Simon's mom. Before Reston was referred to as Snake Den Lake, Gulf Reston renamed it to Lake Audubon as they developed the area. Also notice Floral Drive and Lomar Drive down here. Well, that ended up being called Howland Drive, Gilmore Drive. I don't know why. And somehow Little Jester Court remained unchanged. This is a USGS map, the year that I came along, 1971. Okay, by now, the south part of Reston is taking shape. Reston's second elementary, Hunters Woods, is open. The following year, Hunters Woods Village Center will open, along with the Reston South Golf Course. This is an interesting hand-drawn map of a home tour in 1971. You have to kind of look at it a little upside down because the bottom is Lake Ann and goes southward towards the other side of Reston, or actually stops there where the Dulles Access Road. The 1971 master plan. We see for the first time plans for two dammed lakes in the south part of Reston. Soapstone Drive extends all the way up to Sunrise Valley Drive. And initial plans for the northernmost part of Reston above Barron Cameron. But now, another detour, what Reston could have been. The original master plan included a cemetery bordering Lake Fairfax. We're not dead, we're just resting. So is anyone buried in Reston? Well, this Fairfax County map hanging at the Fairfax Library shows that there were several small family cemeteries before Reston. I saw this map while visiting the library the day before my high school reunion that I mentioned earlier. At the reunion, I was chatting with two old classmates of mine who grew up on Pin Oak Lane right here. And I told them, did you know that there was once a family gravesite there? Let's just say they were thoroughly creeped out. So here's one of the interesting proposals. Golf Reston entertains several interesting ones, including a third golf course. Facing Reston Avenue, the country club would have an L-shaped 18-hole golf course. Woven in would have been single-family homes, a small cluster of garden apartments next to the country club. This all strikes things as a bit odd because at this point, the public South golf course was already planned. Also that same year was this preliminary plan for a development called Round Hill, located on an outlying tract of land west of the future Outer Beltway. This is the same firm who submitted the International Country Club. Like that, Round Hill has a looping street with detached homes and townhouses. But the one thing I can't identify on the key on the right is Basta, which is this right here. I tried searching as to what that is, couldn't find anything online except it came back to this. So if you know, have any ideas, let me know afterwards. It has umlauts over the A, by the way. To top things off, there was a third preliminary plan proposed by the same firm for a postgraduate school campus along Sunrise Valley Drive. The idea for a postgraduate school here was in the original Reston master plan. Some of that area did, however, become Association Drive, which is home to a number of national educational organizations. Now, here's where things get really interesting. 1974, a fully visualized town center proposal. This proposal had an array of buildings on both sides of Reston Avenue. The town center had everything: offices, 2 hotels, hospital, parking, police station, library, sports center, housing, the arts, a nightclub, pergola, Tivoli Garden, and best of all, a petting zoo. Here's another oddity. Have a look at the map from 1979. Besides the town center, the last area for development was above Barron Cameron. Let's count all the lakes in the gray area that we see. There's Lake Newport, there's a second one, a third one, fourth one, fifth one. I mean, the fifth one could be a pond, but yeah. And yes, as late as 1988, there were plans on the table for a second Reston High School located at Wheelie and Barron Cameron Avenues. The detour is over, we're back on our regular route. One of the great things about Reston is all of the pedestrian pathways. Over 55 miles, with most in wooded areas that take you back to a time before Reston. This self-guided walking map with points of interest was included in an early Reston film directory. It also included one for Hunter's Woods. While visiting Reston last summer, my family and I took the Hunter's Woods walk and chanced upon these 2 deer on either side of the path. Just like, imagine what this walk would be. The 2 deer stayed frozen in place the entire time. 1973's Reston directory included a 4-page spread of all the walkways and amenities like tot lots. This included the pathway behind my house growing up, as seen here. Hi mom, hi path in the background. If we isolated all the pathways and sidewalks through town using a current Reston Association map, this would give you some idea of how vast that vein-like system is. Here's a map from 1974, 75. What's missing from this map? The lakes. They're left off there. Any pool goers here? This hand-colored map study was meant to suggest what your neighborhood pool was in 1976. I always felt like the very southern portion of Reston, where Glade Pool is seen, deserved another pool, as you can see by how large of an area that covers. So that would have been all of that down there. And growing up in that area, I wish there was a pool closer to my house. Gene Shield is a local historian and map maker who created this in 1977, all done by hand. He also made other similar maps of the area that incorporated little historical descriptions. This was done in association with the Reston Times and its Reston Herald. By the mid-1970s, Reston had a number of village centers, and this map directory was made to inform shoppers of all the retail options they had. Lake Dan, Tall Oaks, Hunters Woods, and International Center Plaza. 1978. The gray areas note undeveloped or unsold land. The map shows Lake Newport and proposed South Lakes Village Center. And now it's down to only 2 lakes. Who remembers these? A place called Reston Directory was the one place you could always find a map of Reston. For many years, it had a 4-quadrant map, street index, appearing in the back pages. Like those awkward adolescent years when you get braces to straighten your teeth, Reston Avenue needed some adjustments in the late 1970s. For comparison, 1976 today. And here's Reston Avenue, connected into Sunset Hills, and this crazy curve here, and it continued, which is now Old Reston Avenue and on. This county map sketches out a better interchange for Lawyers Road to Reston Avenue, and Reston Avenue to West Ox Road going south, while breaking up Blacksmill Road. I still remember how it originally was, but honestly, I don't think they had any solution. With the dawn of the personal computer age in the 1980s, Reston attracted and promoted technology firms to do business here. In 1982, the Reston Visitor Center at Lake Newport opened, and this detailed 3D model of Reston was in showcase. Today, as we may know, it lives in the Reston Museum vertically on the wall. So now we see a USGS map from 1982. The South Lakes area is filling in. Reston north of Barron Cameron is about to grow in the 1980s. There's a late 1980s map of Reston, which was part of a big promotional package highlighting all of the faculties and pathways of Reston. So you can see all the little green icons, whether it's playgrounds, fields, pools, tennis courts. So here's a fun cartoon map created in 1989 by Dave Gowan. It's looking southward, so Lake Dan is at the bottom and Hunters Woods is at the top. I think this was created as a community-supported advertisement where local businesses could pay to include their names and numbers. So now we have a fully mature Reston divided up into different villages, the town center. As we know, the Reston Town Center went through several studies and scans before it was finally developed starting in the late 1980s. And today it looks more like this. Probably the most up-to-date and accurate map of Reston is put out by the Reston Association to show all the amenities. And a little bit more on the technical side, this is a map study of business growth along the Dulles Corridor. As we know, it's constantly evolving. And so for years, we've seen Metro Silver Line slowly inch along with the completion of phase 1 at Wheelie Reston East. Once finished, the line will extend out to Loudoun County. When simplified to a system map, we, the riders, can easily navigate stations, transfer points, terminals, and the larger area that it serves. This type of system map was first done over 100 years ago for the London Underground and is used worldwide for transportation systems today. Here's the entirety of Metro's system. And now we come to our last detour, where we will examine Reston street names and what interesting and unusual street names they are. The only reference I've ever found to Reston's naming conventions was this early newsletter. It says street sizes determine whether they are avenues, drives, roads, or lanes. With the exception of the Reston Town Center streets and new ones around the Wheelie Metro Station, none of the streets in Reston have street in their names. Reston has an interesting collection of streets named after trees and places around the world, animals, all colors of quite a few streets that evoke antiquity. There are street names that make you say, huh, suggest minerals and the Four Seasons and equestrian themed streets and streets named after actual champion horses and a little something for golf and water lovers. And then we get to streets named after well-known and not so well-known people, including Isaac Newton, Roger Bacon, Michael Faraday, Gary Cameron, Alexander Bell, Wheelie, Robert Fulton, Roland Clark, Beaker. It's a new street over near the Wheelie metro station. I don't know the reason behind the name. And Preston White Drive. But who is Preston White? No idea. Once again, searched around for who that is. No idea.
He was an early engineer.
Okay. Contributing to this talk without two maps of my own creation. This pictorial map pinpoints and illustrates all the places and things that are on Reston, including the Roundhouse, Reston's first sales office, the original Hunters Woods Village Center, Tall Oaks, the W&OD Railroad, the Bowman Distillery, Terracets, solar panels, and so on. If that map looks to the past, imagine a map in the future with a public transportation system that connects all points in Reston, like the DC Metro and the London Underground. And both maps are for sale over on the tables, and the funds will contribute to my hitchhiking trip out. So, ladies and gentlemen, you are here. Thank you.